how many human resources practitioners does it take to change a light bulb? One to change it. One to establish it was wrongfully detached from its role as a shedder of light. And one to test its cognitive abilities and personality as part of the assessment process for deciding whether it has a future within the company or whether it should be let go. My case today is that psychological tests are not as revealing as they've been cracked up. And I'll go on to suggest that there are many other areas which business psychology has so far paid too little attention to, with potentially far more fruitful instruments already existing to measure other attributes which may be more important. And a fundamental part of what I'm going to talk about today is that business psychology does not exist in a political economic vacuum. This is an era when even Theresa May is posturing as a champion of post-Thatcherite roles for the state and the need to curb executive pay. Can you believe that? Well, not me today. Bernie Sanders may have been seen off by Hillary Clinton, but Corbyn as PM really could happen, something that could profoundly affect all of our work in this field. In always, I would say as an aside, in always stressing his unfitness to lead, rather than informing the public of his policies, the media, and especially the BBC, and his own MPs, have been playing the man, not the ball, to distract from what may turn out to be hugely popular changes, which may actually happen. Everyone says it's not going to happen. It may actually happen when we have a crashing economy, which is just, who knows when, but sometime soon, and we become an economy in which no one will believe the idea that their income and job security are safe with the Tories, which has been their main selling point. So in some ways, therefore, what I'm going to say, speaking about today, you could look upon it as an attempt to suggest a few indications of what a radical business psychology might look like, one that fits better with what may be to come in the political and business world. So don't believe people who tell you that it's inevitable that your job insecurity is going to be even worse, that you are going to be at the behest of your mortgage forever, and that this is what's going to dominate the lives of all the employees in the companies that you get involved with. It's not necessarily true. If we have a different kind of government, it could all change radically. Where I start, though, is with the focus on measuring cognitive and personality attributes as fixed and reliable traits. The fundamental problem with this has always been that the meta-analyses show IQ, cognitive tests, have very little predictive power, much less predictive power than is often claimed. And tests of Big Five personality traits, they are even less reliable as a way of predicting who is going to work in an organisation. A basic point about this fixation with these very, very limited tests is that they rely on the assumption that the traits that are being measured are fixed ones, that are stable. It's a fact, and not my opinion, that the Human Genome Project has so far been unable to come up with significant heritabilities, by which I mean more than kind of 5% heritabilities, that sort of figure, which show that genetic variants are a major determinant of what we're like. On the contrary, the Human Genome Project, 15 years into it, is drawing an absolute blank on that. And this is, my opinion, not a fact, but I think it's plenty of molecular geneticists agree with me off the record that they're not going to find it, but actually it's not in your genes. And that's incredibly important because a lot of the assumptions behind business psychology tests is that these traits are inherent and fixed and are not going to change. it's really unfortunate that academic psychology has always been strangled by its focus on cognition and biology, rather than on motivation and emotion and psychosocial causes. That leads business psychologists not to consider measuring all kinds of things which might prove much more fruitful in predicting which employees will be good for what. And if it's not genes, then what is important in causing individual difference? Well, of course, there are shown to be biological transmission of traits. There can be no question that a certain proportion of autistic children are born with a brain abnormality, although we don't really know what causes that. We do know that if a mother is stressed in the last trimester of pregnancy, and this is something that employers seem to pay very little attention to, their offspring, many years later, are likely to have raised cortisol levels and associated behavioural problems like ADHD. Cortisol dysregulation is a major issue arising from prematurity as well, and also from difficulties during the birth. But so I'm not. It's not that I'm actually, a nurturist, flat earther. I'm quite sure that there are physical causes of psychological traits that can be transmitted from parent to child. It's just that I'm saying it's apparently not genes that are nearly as important as they, I think, crack up to be. And in the very period in which the genes have been shown not to matter, early childhood has emerged in study after study as being more and more important. Pathology, in fact, resulting from early childhood is both a major cause of dysfunction in the workplace, of course, but it's also a major cause of exceptional achievement. 1 in 3 exceptional achievers, including entrepreneurs, lost a parent before the age of 15. This is true in the top 600 entries with the most space given to them in the Encyclopedias Britannica and Americana. Those 600 people, 1 in 3 lost a parent before the age of 15, and compared, and this obviously goes back in history, so compared with 18% before Western medicine. So it's a really well-established finding that and possibly the strongest single piece of evidence that adversity is what drives exceptional achievement. I've given many examples in, I think it's chapter 6 of my book, Wasn't Your Genes, of this, particularly the example of Tiger Woods, or the examples of the Polgar sisters, the chess prodigies, and how exceptional achievement is usually the result of hot housing and a great deal of pressure, but of course not always. And the Polgar sisters show how it can be done through playfulness. The implication of this, I think, is huge, and it's not taken up at all within business psychology, to the best of my knowledge. There are ways a radical business psychology can measure how childhood experience plays out in the workplace. And one such instrument is the adverse childhood experiences method for measuring the amount of adverse childhood experience in childhood. ACE, it's called. And it's consistently shown in studies that the number of kinds of maltreatment that a person reports having suffered in childhood and the severity of them correlates with their likelihood of having a mental illness. In the most extreme example, somebody who had 5 or more maltreatments was 193 times more likely to have been diagnosed as schizophrenic than somebody who had suffered no maltreatment. Why is the ACE instrument not used in assessing candidates for posts? I think it could be very revealing of potential performance. But of course, as far as I know, there is no data in which that's been done. So interpreting the results would be difficult, but it would be very good to get started on doing that. It could also, of course, play an important role in making sense of difficulties that a current employee is having within an organisation, and would give indications of what the best way to help that person would be. Speaking as a clinician who works with senior executives, helping them to understand the past in their present through long-term intensive psychodynamic therapy, I can assure you that exploring the childhood roots of difficulties and providing them with a better relationship than the one they may have had with their parents that drove them to become a chief executive, not only can it help with help the emotional health of a senior manager, it can also significantly improve performance, if that's what we care about. We can replace CBT, which is proven not to work in the long term, with methods that explore the early years, and we should do so as soon as possible. Equally, in understanding employee potential, office political abilities need to be measured. They're a good predictor of who will do well and whether they'll be able to deal with stress and whether they'll enjoy their life at work. Office politics is defined, best of all, by four characteristics. Astuteness, being able to read others, your organisation and yourself. And having understood what's going on and made plans, then you require effectiveness and executing them. That means knowing which combination of tactics to use, on whom, when, performed skillfully. Then there is networking, the sort of thing that you might be doing today, some of, which is, even though many of us hate it, it is incredibly important for nurturing relationships and is shown to be an important component of office politics. And finally, the only subtlety that I found pretty much in the whole of the business psychology literature when I was writing my book, Office Politics, the fourth defining feature is the appearance of sincerity. If your colleagues have lost faith in your honesty and integrity, it'll be hard to progress. And one of the best instruments for measuring office political skill is the political skill inventory, Gerald Ferris's invention. And really, I don't know whether this is widely used. It should be widely used in assessing people whether they should be employed, and if people are having difficulties or need help within an employee within an existing organisation. Office politics is absolutely crucial. It's a vital part of life in a service sector economy where getting jobs, pay and promotion are governed by ill-defined amorphous metrics and often boil down to the opinion of your boss and peers. Once upon a time, you used to make a certain number of widgets per day and you were paid a certain amount per widget, and it was completely transparent. Those days are gone. I worked in television for quite a few years, God help me, and I came across a note on the wall in one of the production places where I was working for the BBC, and it was entitled The 6 Stages of Any Project. And they were: 1, enthusiasm; 2, disillusion; 3, panic; 4, hunt for the guilty; 5, punishment for the innocent; 6, reward for those who had nothing to do with it. Office politics has become critical for progression, but better office politics leads to better emotional health, more harmonious offices, and it would be needed in any system. Whether you're in a family or in an office, when interests do not coincide and there is a competition for resources, whether it's the love of a parent or for a pay rise, of course people are going to politic to try and get their way. even St. Jeremy of Corbyn is not going to be able to get rid of office politics. I'm a strong advocate of people, having been incredibly bad at it myself. I'm particularly eager to spare other people having suffered some of the horrors that I suffered as a result of being so bad at it. I think also a business psychology that was truly concerned with the well-being of the workforce would also measure self-determination. I'm referring, of course, to Richard Ryan and Edward Desi's wonderful body of work, which they condense really into the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic goals and motivation. And the intrinsically motivated do so much better than the extrinsically motivated. We live in a sick society that I described in Affluenza and the Selfish Capitalist, which does its very best to get us to focus on all the wrong things, the extrinsic things, the external, looking for praise and doing things for the reward rather than for the process, the intrinsic experience of enjoyment. I refer you to Ryan's and Desi's website, which is selfdeterminationtheory.org, all one word, and on it you'll find a heavenly trove of PDFs of fantastic papers, including one whole section devoted to the application of self-determination theory in business. Now, in the case of senior managers, another key instrument which I don't believe is widely used is Jonathan's Dirty Dozen, his 12 questions for measuring in quick order the extent to which somebody has the dark triad of personality characteristics: psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. These are crucial, actually, in a world where office politics is governing what happens, and explain to a significant extent why so many people at the top are nuts. The character of many people at the top is well illustrated by this story. A charity worker in a small town notes that the chief executive of the main employer has never given anything to charity, and so she makes an appointment, goes to see him, and asks if he might consider a contribution. His reply is, "Did you know that I have elderly parents, both in nursing homes, costing $100,000 a year each?" "Oh, no, I didn't know that." "Did you know my ex-wife has to look after our severely disabled son requiring 24-hour care?" "Oh, dear, I didn't know that." "Did you know that my sister was severely injured in a car crash and also requires a great deal of expensive care?" "No, I didn't know that either." "Well, if I don't contribute any money to helping any of them, what makes you think I'm going to give any money to you?" American CEOs come out 4 times more likely to be psychopathic than the general population. As you may have read, Belinda Board's excellent study in this country showing that senior managers in this country are statistically significantly more likely to suffer several of the major personality disorders like narcissism and histrionics than not just people in normal mental hospitals, but people in hospitals for the convicted mentally ill. This is, a laughing matter at one level, but not a laughing matter at another. These people are in control of what's going on in our lives. And managing dark talent, if you want to give it that term, is a crucial job for us. Helping these people to become more empathic and to realise that just living your life around the me mantra is not necessarily getting them where they would like to be. I mean, what should we think about Donald Trump, Sir, soon not to be Philip Green, and Mike Ashley? I would say they need our help, not our derision. And hopefully, we'll be moving to societies which simply do not allow such monstrous individuals to express their pathology through their business careers, because that is what they're doing. Business psychology needs to become much more concerned with fostering emotionally healthy organisations and individuals, rather than allied to profit and helping hedge funds decide which of the employees to get rid of when they take over Boots or the AA. The problem is the whole concept of the application of business psychology in the form of the words human resources. What in God's name is that as a title for that role? It's almost a parody of Marx's concept of the unit of labour. It suggests no difference between a human unit and units of energy or IT applications for computer systems. We need new words for a new role for what is called HR. And no better time than now, for these are interesting ones we live in. I've never known an era where the politicians are more blatantly going into that as a career to feather their own nose. Leveson exposed the extent of the revolving doors amongst the ruling elite. I still, to this day, sit, and I think I wrote an article in The Guardian about this, with my mouth agape, that Jeremy Hunt is in charge of the health service still. This man who had a special advisor, who, according to who was providing market-sensitive information to B-Sky-B, and according to Hunt, he had no idea this was going on. So either we have to believe that he was an unbelievably inefficient manager of his special advisor, or else we have to believe that he's a bare-faced liar, and it's pretty easy to see which one I would go with. There's a need for a real acknowledgement rather than Theresa May's pathetic witchery. The free market economics and neoliberalism, which we've endured, has failed. In 2000, funnily enough, in the case of May, I was very tempted to show you, but you can look it up for yourselves on YouTube, 2008 Newsnight, where I challenged Theresa May to apologise for Thatcherism following the crash. And you can see that she just sits there like a goldfish, kind of not thinking what to say. And I don't find her apology today, these days, very convincing. In accord with Thomas Piketty's famous thesis, the title of Guy Standing's new book is, quote, "The Corruption of Capitalism, Why Rentiers Thrive and Work Does Not Pay." And Standing shows how the global economy is rigged by international trade agreements to help corporations impose those working conditions on individual nations that they find most profitable. He shows how neoliberalism has sucked money from the poor and the middle into the pockets of the rich. The extreme incompetence of the private sector is gradually becoming unavoidably visible to all. Of course, I would maintain that the issue here is not about public versus private. There have been some jolly inefficient public sector organisations. Of course there have. But my goodness me, there are some inefficient private ones. And outsourcing and the consequent removal of responsibility is a key factor in why privatised companies are so staggeringly inefficient now. I can give you a personal reminiscence, which is of a very recent incident on the Chiswick flyover, not more than a mile from here, where, following a minor accident, the M4 was blocked up because I was speaking to my recovery company, who I thought were Green Assist, but in fact had been taken over by QuickFit. And the call centre had been outsourced to Cape Town, South Africa. So the person I was speaking to did not have the faintest idea what I was talking about when I said the Chiswick flyover. They had no idea that I was blocking up a major artery into London. And eventually the police, they then ran around their presumably very limited group, because they, of course, outsource, the recovery company themselves don't recover, they outsource it to to various garages around the place. And the nearest van that they could find that was going to come and pick me up was in Oxford, which is where I just come from. Presumably because this company, Mansfield, didn't want to, for some reason, think it wasn't in their commercial interest to do this job. However, when the police rang up, a van magically appeared within about 10 minutes, and the company who provided this van was none other than Mansfield. So, frankly, incompetent beyond belief. And God knows what expense it caused in terms of, if you actually look at the bigger picture, you can look in terms of climate change, the amount of car fumes that were fired off into the atmosphere, the number of hours lost at work, the number of people not getting home on time, etc., because of blocking up the M4. Unbelievable. There's also the looting of corporations by senior executives with their ludicrous pay packages and the kind of virtually illegal activities of Philip Green and of course Mike Ashley. There's just a total loss of duty to employees, consumers and the wider community. And it's in this environment that business psychology and its application through HR is operating. And I would ask you, what should be the objects of business psychology? Is it just to help corporations increase profits? The recent, you could say it's to increase happiness, but I personally take a very, very dim view of the whole happiness charade. We weren't put on this earth to be happy, for God's sake. We're British, for God's sake. We need something much more meaningful to me than happiness, which is, I regard as a transient state akin to pleasure that you might have from having sex and smoking a cigarette or having a drink. Something more profound, and any of you could probably come up with something better than this, but what I came up for in my rather thin book on emotional health was 6 things. Living in the present, two-way communication, so you're neither jammed on transmit nor jammed on receive, neither on coke nor on diazepam. Very difficult to do. How much of the time are you actually two-way communicating? Insight, which is, of course, what turns the lead of childhood pathology or distress as a result of social problems into the gold of emotional health. Playfulness, not game playing. Vivacity, not hyperactivity. And authenticity, not sincerity. The sincerity that we saw with Blair when he said, I really, really felt it was the right thing to do to invade Iraq, as though that justified it. It's an American way of thinking. It's because I feel something strongly, I have strong emotions, therefore it's all right. They confuse authenticity with sincerity, as Lionel Trilling famously showed in his book. So, my argument today is that business psychology should make its contribution to creating a society which fosters emotionally healthy businesses and individuals. At the top of the list of ways of achieving that goal is the creation of a system which puts the enabling of parents to meet the needs of small children ahead of the riches of the tiny few in our destructively, disgracefully inequitable society. That means a complete rethink of work-life balance, and here we have a huge part to play. A recognition that if true gender equality is to happen, parents, and particularly women, mothers, who could be men but are usually women, must be properly supported by both business and government. For all this to occur, we need, and I believe may eventually get, a Scandinavian-shaped political economy, not the selfish capitalism which has blighted our lives for nearly 40 years. Thank you.
Wow. That's all I've got to say. say really. As a mother of two boys, I wholeheartedly agree with what Olivia just said, and it was one of the reasons I wanted to retrain as a business psychology, to try and find work that works for, you know, women that still want to be a great mother, but also, you know, participate in the workplace. So has anyone got any questions? Whoa, okay, we're off.
Right. Interestingly, in terms of personality tests, I think I'd probably agree with you that you can't tell a client somebody who's guaranteed to succeed, but I have confidence I can tell a company somebody who's guaranteed to fail. You may remember writing an article about 20 years ago, I think it was for the Mail on Sunday, called Testing the Testers, where you got about a dozen well-known psychometricians.
God, what a memory you have.
Yeah. No, because I was one of them, and the thing we asked us to do was to look at personality tests of each other without knowing who we were. And I think you were honest enough to print my assessment of you, where I put you as an unstable introvert and that the company shouldn't touch you with a big barge. Now, my question is, would I be right if I was working on behalf of a company rather than suggesting you should be a freelance journalist?
Yes, well, I don't do much journalism these days. Well, I mean, I would say that from a scientific, just to go back to the basic scientific point, which we seem to agree on, that simply testing the big five seems to be a pretty poor predictor, except perhaps if you're looking for sort of checkout personnel, it may be helpful, you know, in predicting which one is going to turn up to work on time and that kind of thing. But certainly when it comes to predicting who's going to, these tests are still done on senior managers, and I would contend that they are so impoverished compared to the sort of things I've been proposing. I think doing ACE, doing self-determination theory tests, those kinds of much more subtle and profound tests would uncover a great deal more and give you a much better basis on which to predict. I mean, obviously, an awful lot of appointments are anyway highly political and also to do with whether people like each other or not, and whether the people making the appointments like the people who are coming in, and often it's predetermined and blah, blah, blah. So office politics are actually critical very often in appointments.
Would I have been wrong not to recommend you at that time?
No, you would have been absolutely right not to recommend me, yeah. But I mean, okay, so what? I don't think it's that hard to spot the fact that I'm not the kind of person who's going to do very well in the corporate.
Yeah. Thank God for that. Any other questions?
Hello, it's a great pleasure to hear what you have to say and deeply refreshing to hear your views. Yesterday we heard a lot about optimising human efficiencies through profiling. Made me very twitchy because it sounded highly selective to me. And there was also acknowledgement of the need for moderation, ethics and regulation around this kind of behaviour. I wonder if you could share with us whether you think that sort of thing is the solution, because I hear in what you say, in fact, you're talking about macro-political responses to a current economic political situation. But what we've been talking about this conference is in fact, the more granular, this is what we do day to day, and how do we manage the governance of that? And I wondered if you had something.
Yeah, two things I think. One is, why is this optimising being done? Is the objective simply to try and get this unit of labour to be more productive, or is it to try and create, if you like, a little mini society in which people are enjoying their work and participating because of that and getting along well with each other? No, I don't think so. So one might question the whole enterprise from that point of view. But if you start to try and persuade the senior managers to think of their corporation in a different way, in the way that John Lewis has always held up, or the way where there is a sense of participation, a sense of being part of the community, then you might be testing for other things. It wouldn't just, I mean, fine, you want to test whether as much as it is scientifically possible, which frankly I think is not very. But insofar as it is, by all means, do the tests that you think will tell whether people are able to do the job properly. But what about the question of whether this person is going to screw everyone else up because they are, scoring very high on the dark triad? So yeah, they may do well and they may use, the team that they're going to work with as a platform for moving onwards and upwards. But is that necessarily what's best in the big picture for that corporation?
Okay, any others?
I was going to ask about your views on the ethics of bringing up what could potentially be quite traumatic experiences from childhood in a selection context. And I guess it's the ethics and the legality behind that. So someone comes along to a job interview, is asked about some traumatic childhood experience, possibly brings up disturbing memories. And also how we go about selling the feasibility of such assessments to organisations where they can't see the direct link between how you're parented and how you might be behaving in the workforce as a leader now.
Well, I mean, there's quite a bit you can refer to in terms of the science in trying to convince your client of the importance of the early years for how people turn out. As for the ethical question, I don't think there's a problem there. I think, the adverse childhood experience instrument has been used on probably hundreds of thousands of people. And as far as I know, there isn't any suggestion that it traumatises them, because you're not actually in that test, trying to get them to relive the experience or anything like that. You're simply saying, did your parents ever hit you as a child, or that kind of stuff. Again, were you sexually abused? Well, if the person knows they were sexually abused, then for them to simply tick yes. You're not asking them for the gory details or asking them to relive it. You're just asking them, are you not cognizant of this having happened to you? So, as far as I know, I think if you went to the ACE people, they would be able to give you a fuller answer. But I mean, America is a pretty bureaucratic place, despite the fact it's supposed to be a free market paradise. And actually, I don't suppose for 1 minute that people could have been giving the ACE to 100,000 people or whatever without it having got through all the ethical committee.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. I think we'll have to leave it there because we're going into our next phase of talks. But I think Oliver is going to be hanging around for a bit, so if anyone wants to grab him out of the sort of tea and coffee station, he might do a runner now. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much.